Hey everyone, how is your game life?
I have no game, no life.
When I look out my window, many sights to see. When I look in my window, so many different people to be, that it's strange, so strange. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. Must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch. Oh, must be the season of the witch.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Team Yume podcast. The topic I wanted to bridge tonight, for simplicity's sake, since we don't have much time to properly engage in multicultural, multilateral debates about
Here's
games.
what it comes down to. Madhog has been playing Klonoa. Madhog wants to gush about Klonoa in a podcast, so here we are.
I have been playing a lot of games, and I would love to have the time to talk about all of them. So the topic I wanted to bridge tonight, to put us all on the same page, was the following. What is the game or game series that made you consider for the very first time that games could be art? What impacted you so much that it changed your perspective on the medium and it made you think deeper about said medium? Ross, you go first.
Well, and here I thought I was going to be talking about an obscure Namco series I just happened to be playing, but no, that does not fit in at all.
Well, like I said, if this podcast were to be longer, we could talk about all the games we've been playing recently. For example, I played Hollow Knight. It's good. Do you want me to tell you how good it is? Here's the next hour or so.
No, I think your Twitter basically has done a good enough job of that.
Yes, I've taken the habit of dissecting and analyzing video games or otherwise the media I consume on the Twitters. It's
All right, well,
a very convenient way to do so.
for me, the game was, and again, Madhog is going to balk at this so hard I can just see it coming.
You're just
Wait,
being a bit
are we-
assumptive, aren't you?
Are we talking about a game or a game series?
Well, a specific game. So I first need to put you in my shoes. So
Your shoes are a bit sweaty and they stink. Could you?
I
could
have
you
no
not?
shoes on right now, so they can't. Anyway, so let's flash back to the early 90s. Ross is used to playing side-scrolling platformers like Mario and Sonic.
Mm-hmm.
He is not accustomed to games that attempted to tell any type of story at all. Yes, RPGs definitely existed at that time, but I had not actually encountered any of them. So I owned the Sega Genesis at the time, or Sega Mega Drive in the European regions. And I got my hands on a Sega CD hand-me-down basically at the end of the console's lifespan. And among them were
Lunar.
two.
Is it Lunar?
It's Lunar. But, among them were actually two RPGs. Yes, there was actually another RPG among the games I got at the time. It was Dungeons and Dragons Eye of the Beholder.
Oh,
which
I
was a
remember
first-person
that one.
dungeon crawler. The story in that game is extremely threadbare. It's mostly just grinding your way through like a 10-floor dungeon.
Yes, it's a bobbin threadbare of a story.
Yes. Lunar, on the other hand, captivated me at the time. Again,
I am so aware of it, you have no idea. It's not like you have given me the complete utter rundown of how much you love this series.
I know, but that love comes from a very personal place.
As all loves do.
It was the game that showed that gaming could be more than running to the right and rescuing a princess or being up a fat doctor.
Yes, it could also be all three at once, plus dragons.
No, so as time went on,
and dung beetles.
Yes, and dung beetles. So as time went on, it just so happened that RPGs became more and more prevalent in the American marketplace. So I was actually quite happy when the next generation came around and games were starting to get more and more story focused, because in general it showed that you could do more with the medium than had been able to be done before, if that makes sense. It was, I guess, the next game that kind of really solidified that gaming could tell more of a story than the simplistic stuff that even like maybe Lunar presented, which had very simple themes, was Metal Gear Solid. Yes, it did. I'm not talking about later on when the series got so completely and utterly goofy.
Well, I would argue that the plot in that game and the way it tackles its philosophies and themes tends to be a bit heavy-handed, but at the time, its ubiquitous presence really was perfect timing.
So basically, at the time, in 1998, Metal Gear Solid storyline was more serious than most of its contemporaries, even if it did pack a boatload of just goofy nonsense. Basically, it felt like an over-the-top action movie with some philosophy thrown in. And again, it was fairly heavy-handed on its messaging, but was also something that gaming really hadn't attempted, or at least in a mainstream sense attempted before.
Yes, well, before that, Final Fantasy VII was technically the game that broke into the mainstream as the one with a big, deep narrative and ambition and themes and the characters and everything in between. So the arrival of Metal Gear Solid really felt like the next logical step that cemented the PlayStation as possibly the most significant console of the time.
So it was 1998 that Lufia game came. Lufia, did you say it?
No, Lunar, I'm sorry, did you say Lufia?
Sorry, I mixed it.
Lufia is a completely different game series, but...
It doesn't even sound similar.
No, I got them confused myself. I was just like, wait, are the two series connected? For a while I thought so.
Really? Just because they have one syllable in common?
Well, they were also RPGs, so they are the same genre. Again, you're talking about the 90s, where there's not a lot of information readily accessible besides a name and possibly a genre or a screenshot or two, you know what I'm saying?
Well, that same year on computer side there was Baldur's Gate, which was also kind of a self-discovery plot was in that, which was kind of deep.
A self-discovery plot that was kind of deep. Matti Mali, 2019.
If you're looking at like a CRPG from that time period that probably really pushed like every envelope storytelling wise that there was to push, it was probably Planescape.
Yes, Planescape Torment. Some people can never shut up about it.
I haven't played it, but I used to watch my older brother play it.
CRPGs, I get what their appeal is supposed to be, but they do not appeal to me in the slightest, mostly because in my RPG experience, I value the gameplay just as much as the narrative. And in CRPG, especially in Planescape Torment, the act of actually playing the game gets in the way of enjoying the story, because it doesn't play very well at all.
Yeah, apparently its system is much better than in Baldur's Gate 2. Baldur's Gate 2 is the ultimate pinnacle of that design.
Now, keep in mind, I actually played the first 2 Fallout games, or tried being the key word, and they would absolutely bore me to tears because of the overall experience being aged very poorly.
Yeah,
Then
though
again,
in
I think you have an advantage if you have grown up with those games, but if you come to them after playing, say, the modern iteration of a Western RPG, you will find yourself in the grasp, in the clutches of a test of patience, to say the least.
I've played the first Fallout game and it's just going from place to place and it's kind of loosely connected.
Well, there
In the-
are individual scenarios with individual stories that are influenced by your decisions, connected loosely by the setting more than the overarching narrative. The setting itself provides the narrative. Anyway, Ross is getting restless, as you can hear. I wish he could mute his microphone when he decides to do something like that.
I
but-
literally just swiveled in my chair a tiny bit.
How dare you, sir!
I know.
How dare you
Hitler.
amuse yourself! Anyway, so you were saying about Lunar, we took the topic away from you.
I mean, there's not much else to say. It's a simple kind of love story game, but
A love story between a young Ross and a game.
yes, but I mean, there's the one that showed me that gaming can be more than just gameplay, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Which is what I was used to.
The original question was, in fact, what is the game that made you consider games as an art form? And if that is your answer, it's a perfectly good answer, especially since you were a child discovering games at your own pace.
Mm-hmm.
Matti.
I guess the first picked impact on me video gaming wise at the age of 10 with Rayman 2 The Great Escape.
Rayman 2. Did you know it's available on goodoldgames.com?
Yeah, I had to buy it when I realized the CD version doesn't work on modern systems anymore.
It's absolutely impossible to play that game with a keyboard. Trust me, I tried.
I can do it rather well. Well, I grew
Well, good
up with
for you.
I grew up with keyboard gaming, and I don't think I've ever used an what was they called?
Controller.
Yeah, controller with a computer.
Well, you sound like a PC gamer through and through, much like Devar.
Yeah, the only consoles I have are some of Nintendo's handheld devices, Game Boy Advance, DS, and 3DS.
How many consoles do you currently possess? Ross, don't answer. It's not a question for you because we would be here all night.
The number is somewhere around 90.
Technically 3, 4 if you count Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Advance SP as separate entities.
Why would you not count them?
Well, they're basically the same system, just
Well,
little
you still
enhancements.
have 2 physically different consoles.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I have 4 consoles.
Okay, so I have a PlayStation 4. I have a PlayStation Portable, which was given to me after the previous owner was absolutely done with it. I have a Nintendo 3DS, which is actually a 2DS. I have the regular Nintendo DS. I have a still functioning PlayStation 2, and it's an old model too. I have a
Yeah.
Nintendo Switch, and that's about it, yes.
I don't distinctly remember from my childhood that we have one of those older consoles that, not Odyssey, but some old. It had that
Atari?
weird. No. It was older because it has that shotgun with it, or rifle, that you point at the screen. But
Okay.
yeah, we didn't
I'm
have
honestly not terribly familiar with what consoles were released in Finland, so I really couldn't narrow that down for you. I know the original Magnavox Odyssey used a pretty serious-looking rifle, but there were also a lot of more dedicated video games that also had guns of varying seriousness.
I hear that if you plug a second controller in a game of Duck Hunt, you control the dog. Is that correct?
No, you do not control the dog, you control the ducks.
Oh yes, that actually makes more sense.
Yeah, we didn't have any of the big consoles in our household. My parents didn't really appreciate video gaming.
Yes,
Actually,
well...
that actually brings up a story from my childhood. So, in my region, the NES was basically the console that ruled the 80s. So I know in Europe it was mostly the home micros that really were dominant, with
Yes,
with the Sega Master System mostly being the one that kind of made inroads in most countries.
We had our Commodore 64 and the
Your
early
Sinclair
versions of
Spectrums.
Windows. I have also a childhood story after yours.
Okay, but so we had an NES because of course we did. I mean, they were everywhere in America. But the thing was, in my region, it was sold with a combo cartridge that included Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt.
Yes, I remember that cartridge
Oh,
existing.
fantastic!
That's about
Here's
it.
the thing,
That's my contribution.
Here's the thing, though. I did not get a zapper or the light gun with the NES.
Oh, so you had to
Duck
use
Hunt
the
was this
regular
like mythical
control.
game for me. Like when I would go over other people's house, I would want to play Duck Hunt, and they would look at me like I have like 3 heads. Because it was a game that everyone had. But I didn't have the stupid gun.
Yes, try to play that game with just a regular NES controller. That's a fun time.
You can't. You literally can't. It's not like there's a crosshair that you can move around. There's nothing. It does not work without a zapper gun.
Yeah,
What? Not even the Power Glove?
Nope.
For the first 10 years of my childhood, the only video games we had was on my father's old laptop that had Prince of Persia and Dyna Blaster, and that's it.
Dino Blaster!
Well, Prince of Persia is rough. That's like your first game. Oh no.
Yeah, but I did manage to complete it at like the age of 6 or something.
Oh
Wow.
god. That's
You
like
know-
complete trial and error, that game.
Wow, there was a time in which we trained gamers by fire.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
The newer generation is too soft with their Dark Souls and their Dark Souls-like. At the
They need to
time,
sit down with freaking Battletoads and
Yes.
nothing else.
back in the
Put hair
day,
on your chest.
we had
Oh.
Prince of Persia back in the day.
Oh, I forgot we did have some server games or kind of this disc games that you had to order the rest of them, but we never did. We had Wacky Wheels, Galactics, Depth Dwellers, and Fuzzy's World. It was this mini golf game.
Okay, I do know Death Dwellers. It's a very mediocre first-person shooter.
Indeed it is.
Speaking of first-person shooters, here is my short childhood story.
Okay.
Perhaps my earliest memory about video games ever.
Uh-oh.
Perhaps also what inspired me to play games for myself. My father used to be ahead of the curve when it comes to home computer technology. In the early 90s, he had, get this, a Windows 3.1 system.
Ooh.
Ooh, indeed. And you know what he liked to play on that Windows 3.1 system?
Is it Doom or Wolfenstein 3D?
It was Wolfenstein 3D. So my very earliest memory of any game whatsoever was my father killing
Shooting Nazis.
puppies
Nice.
in Wolfenstein 3D.
Nice.
Yes, Nazis and Nazi dogs, which are bad boys. And we moved on from there. Then I saw him play the original Duke Nukem 2D games.
Okay, those side-scrolling ones, got it.
Yes,
Boy, he actually had a personality.
yes, a terrible personality, but
Personality is what made him,
nonetheless.
whether you like it or not.
I mean, it is a relic of the 90s for a good reason. And then he never played Doom. But I played Doom 2 at some point.
Oh my.
But really, the genre I grew up with were graphic adventure games. Yet, the time in which I would start to seriously think and ponder about video games, the time in which I would start to really consider the possibility that analyzing video games, getting a deeper meaning out of them, was worth my time, was after playing a certain game. And that game, I would only get to play it no longer than 10 years ago, actually.
Wahoo!
I know you are baiting me, Ross, but I could seriously start dancing. Wahoo! That little medley is forever burnt into my cerebrus until the day I die and beyond. But I am not sure you actually answered your question, Matti.
Yeah, I was talking about Rayman 2 the Great
yes.
Escape.
Is there anything in particular that inspired you that changed the way you look at video games forever?
Yeah, that world was just magical, man. And
It's just so magical, man.
yeah, so that dark yet whimsical atmosphere and the sense of adventure, and it was kind of an important milestone. Though, if you want to go for more deeper, this can be a good narrative kind of stuff. And then there was the Prince of Persia's Sands of Time trilogy.
That's a pretty milestone in its own right, from a time in which Ubisoft wasn't drowning us all with sandbox games.
That's true. They actually tried to do things, correct? They released stuff like Lunar Dragon Song. Oh no.
Now I get to talk about Klonoa.
Wahoo!
Wahoo! In 2009, I was the semi-proud owner of a Nintendo Wii. I played Super Mario Galaxy on it. I played The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess on it. I liked them both very much. I liked Midna very much, but
Yes,
you already know that.
Very apparent, yes.
During that time, and I think it was the spring of 2009, I come across the trailer of a new up-and-coming video game, which I would later learn it was supposed to be a remake. That game was Klonoa, Door to Phantomile, the remake for the Nintendo Wii. And that's the first time I played Klonoa. And I was absolutely blown away by it.
Yeah, that's why he doesn't possess a head anymore.
Yes, I have a ghostly ectoplasmic semblance of a head where my head used to be.
Correct. The sounds come out of his neck hole.
Right.
Okay. This is canon now.
This is... where do I even begin to talk about Klonoa? Because it's one of those games that I have been reticent to discuss openly with people because it impacted me so much, so thoroughly, that anything I could ever say about it will not do justice to it. This is a game that made me think about such elements that before that I would not bother to apply on video games. It made me think about subtext, about allegory, metatext, and how a story can be told not just via cutscenes, but also via the gameplay experience itself. It's one of those experiences that truly shaped the very way I look at video games or the potential of video games overall. And that is why I tend to have somewhat high standards whenever I would choose a title to invest time in, because I take gaming very seriously, eh? Which is an oxymoron, but you get what I mean. I don't like platformers, or rather, I am not a big fan of the genre.
That's why you're also a fan of Sonic.
Case in point, I don't particularly enjoy puzzles anymore. I thought I enjoyed puzzles as a child as I play point-and-click adventure games, but as it turned out, I just deluded myself into that because my favorite game of all time is Sam & Max Hit the Road, which is also
Everything that game has to do has to be fun.
But Klonoa just happened to be a puzzle platformer, and I love everything about it. From the way levels are designed, to the way the difficulty curve is presented and implemented, from the nature of the puzzles themselves, which require both amounts of skill and timing, the gameplay style, from the simplicity of the controls, 2 buttons to do everything. And there is so much that can be done with that. It's the simple premise of its gameplay skeleton, if you will, from which everything else is built upon. That's great in its own right, and I enjoyed playing that game a lot. But it wasn't up until the ending of the game that I realized just how much clever this game was. The very simple, seemingly simple way this game is presented, the very idea of this looking like such a fun and innocent game for kids was used against me, against my expectations of the text, to swindle and bamboozle and completely recontextualize my entire experience up to that ending. It's one of those out of nowhere, but if you look back, heavily foreshadowed endings that change the nature of the game. It was also one of those endings that would utterly ensure that Klonoa could never become a profitable franchise. Usually, when you try to set up a successful franchise like Mario or Sonic, you make sure that they are very uncomplicated from a narrative standpoint. You defeat the bad guy, you save the princess at the end, rinse and repeat for the next 200 games, right?
Well, if that was true, then Kingdom Hearts would have gone past the second game.
Right. But Klonoa goes against all that. It goes against all that to tell its own story, and also to make a clever commentary about the very nature of video games. In parallel with the short-lived nature of childhood, which is also in parallel with dreaming. And dreaming is a leitmotif in the Klonoa series. The main character is also known as the Dream Traveler for a reason, but it is nothing like you would expect when it comes to dreams, or their application in the text. And I dare not spoil that ending or the narrative as a whole, but it is deceptively simple. It hides a greater darkness, if you will, a more somber tone. The series in its entirety, at least including the sequel, Lunatia's Veil, which was for the PlayStation 2, is about the emotional turmoil of growing up. I could seriously talk about the entire Klonoa series for hours upon end.
Yes, that's again the reason why you wanted to do this podcast, I'm sure. But
I'm already tweeting and posting about this game as I replay it.
by the way, did
my
you ever
Twitter
get that
account.
TV situation to work out for you?
No. As it stands, this actually brings me to a more pragmatic topic in relation to these games. The trouble with the Klonoa series is that it was not a very successful or long-lived series, and as such, it is very mistreated. You could technically get Klonoa, the original PS1 version of Klonoa, where the character was a 2D sprite moving in a 2.5D world, on the PlayStation Network, which is probably the easiest and cheapest way to get it.
Definitely. The game is quite rare in some countries.
I'm aware, but the problem with that is that you can only play it for the PlayStation 3, if you had one, or the PlayStation P, again, if you had one. Because of this way that digital content is regulated by the corporations, there are locks in place that prevent you from playing that game in more modern systems, even though you own them and the PlayStation Network carries over to the newer consoles by Sony. But regardless, I used to have a PlayStation 3. I don't anymore, for reasons.
That's where you were playing Tales of Symphonia, which also has a Klonoa reference in it.
Yes, I am aware.
It has?
Yes. There's a Klonoa costume for Presea.
Yes.
Okay.
It's hitting at the end of the game, so basically what you have to do is you have to get the Darius emblem on Darius Carlon, then go all the way back to Tetheala, and then in one of the cities, I forget exactly what, an event will trigger where basically someone gives Presea a Klonoa costume. There's a lot of goofy stuff that happens in Tales of Symphonia after you get that stupid Darius emblem, which again is like 75% through the final area of the game. They expect you to just leave that dungeon, which you don't even probably think is possible at that point, and then go back and go all over the main map for all this extra stuff. It's weird.
So, I have a PlayStation Portable, thankfully, so I could play Klonoa on that one. But I don't have my Nintendo Wii anymore, so I cannot play the physical copy of the Klonoa remake, which is the game that inspired me all those years ago to begin with. And I actually like it more than the original version because of that. I'm more emotionally attached to it. Klonoa is still Klonoa, so I love it regardless. But I can only play it on the PlayStation Portable because of the aforementioned situation. The problem is that I found out that the small screen of the PlayStation Portable hurts my eyes. So I tried to get equipment to connect my PlayStation Portable to my TV screen. I followed Ross's suggestion, and once I did get all I needed, which is to say a AV cable and a HD component for the AV cable to connect to the HDMI output of my television and all the technical mambo jumbo, the image and the sound are distorted, so it looks and sounds like garbage.
It looks even more like a dream.
It looks like a nightmare.
Okay, I had to try to describe this for people that are unfamiliar with the PSP. So the PSP has a weird output on it. Only the 2000 and the 3000 models have this output. And what allows you to do is output through either composite or component cables. Composite are the red, yellow, white, and the component are the 5 cattails. Now, here's the thing that's bonkers about the PSP, okay? The composite cables actually don't let you play games on a TV. You can only do stuff like watch UMD movies through it. It's completely pointless. So you have to go with component, which unfortunately is one of those standards that has kind of sort of been left by the wayside. Unless you have some older TVs in your house, you probably don't have stuff with component ports on them anymore. And that's the problem that Madhog hit, is he doesn't actually have a TV with direct component input. He had to try to go through a converter, which apparently the converter did not work.
At least not fully.
So that's the situation that he's in. Basically, it's one of those things that if there are such things as like pawn shops or like thrift stores in Italy, if you happen to be by one, maybe see if you can get an older TV from there super cheap that just happens to have those ports on it, but otherwise you're kind of stuck.
Here's a recent development that I just found out today.
Oh?
My PlayStation 2 copy of Klonoa 2 Lunatia's Veil, which I can play very easily on my still functioning PlayStation 2.
Yes.
It turns out it might be slightly ruined.
Uh-oh.
So I was playing the game today, and when I did get to a new area, a specific new area, the game could not load the level. I get the black screen of death, and nothing happens.
That's tough to tell because you're running it on an old PS2. So it's tough to tell whether it's the disc that's the problem or whether the system's beginning to go.
Well, I can play Resident Evil 4 on it just perfectly fine, so...
Unfortunately, the lasers get really wonky with age, so they might play one game completely fine, while another game it struggles with, and even if the two discs were in the same condition.
Yes?
My personal suggestion to you would be to see if there's a shop that you can take the disc to get resurfaced. Basically, they have like specialized disc buffing.
I bought that disc from Amazon
No,
UK.
don't buy one. These are like professional grade ones. The ones that you buy are freaking worthless. Never ever use them. No, but these ones actually like literally work in such a way that that it won't leave like residue and stuff on the disc. It'll actually basically just cleanly take a tiny layer off of the plastic so it works out those scratches. That's my personal suggestion for you.
Okay, well, thanks, but I was about to say that since I have an older save file of the game, I did a bit of an experiment, and as it turned out, it happens only in one area of the game. So if I play past it in the previous save file, it works just
Then
fine.
You don't have a problem.
So basically, for whatever reason, there is an entire area in this game that is not accessible. So if I wanted to play this game from the start, a whole new save file, I would get stuck at a certain point. That breaks my heart. But at least I can still play the rest of it in the previously existing save file.
Was it a good level?
I have been deprived access to 2 levels. One level is a rather long descent into a mirror madhouse in a world in which everybody is insecure and xenophobic. It's a trippy experience, to say the least, and I cannot play that anymore. The other one, and that is the one that really makes me weep because I cannot play it anymore, is a snowboarding session. There is nothing particularly special about it other than the music that plays on that section, which is this ridiculously cute, upbeat tune with lyrics of a made-up gibberish language that is the language of the characters in the games, and it's just the most adorable thing.
Yeah.
I also, not to brag, but I am relatively decent at Klonoa.
Humble brag, huh? Okay.
It's years of practice, really.
Many games that I'm pretty good at too. Like, Arcana Heart 3, or bloody, most of the Sonic games are just committed to muscle memory for me.
Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, it has some program that Windows 10 doesn't support anymore, so I had to buy a copy from Good Old Games.
Yeah, unfortunately, PC gaming is kind of rough like that.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, I'm good because I work with consoles. Basically, those are dedicated machines. I just have to figure out how to hook up to my computer.
Yes, that's the ticket. So yes, these are my Klonoa woes. Like I said, it's a very short-lived series. There are 2 mainline games, Klonoa 1 and 2. One remake.
Wasn't there like a Game Boy Advance?
There was
weird
a Game Boy
thing?
Advance titled Empire of Dreams, which I played on the Wii U of all consoles, and I hated it! Do you know why I hated it?
I honestly don't know.
2 words. Auto-scrolling.
Oh.
It had
no.
auto-scrolling levels that killed the game for me. Also, the Game Boy Advance is very much akin to the first game in one specific migraine-inducing aspect. You cannot replay old levels. Once you beat a level, you are automatically
You're done.
moved to the
Got
next
it.
one, you're done. So you cannot farm for lives.
So basically, you have to get good
Exactly.
on auto-scrolling levels, which are very trial and error. That's right.
Yes. I really liked the remake because the remake lets you farm for life right from the start. You can replay all the levels you played before.
Because as Madhog has admitted, he's not terribly good at platformers.
No, but I did get good at Klonoa. Klonoa, by the way, feels and controls like a dream.
I've played it extremely briefly, and yes, I can say that the controls are great.
Yes. So you said at some point you wanted to put Klonoa in your PS1 Classic?
Yes, it's currently being done by a friend of mine as we speak.
We should stream Klonoa once you're done with that. I really want to showcase that game, but I don't have the means to do so in a professional manner, so but at the very least I have you.
I'd actually probably be best suited to emulate it on my computer because
Let's do that.
my capture card has this weird problem where when it's going to OBS and only when it's going to OBS, that the image is choppy, like stutters like every 10 seconds or so. It's hyper annoying.
You've told me about that. But you know what? Let's do that. It's a very short and sweet game anyway, so we could stream it once or twice.
We'll put that on the docket as soon as Lunar is done.
Which will be never.
I'm nearly through Lunar, the next to last game in the retrospective, so we're getting close.
It's in the bucket list then.
Okay, so I do want to talk about one game, what I've been going through real quick, since it's kind of what I've been kind of wanting to talk about. I have been looking at another obscure Namco series, since we're kind of on that topic. So, recently I got a model. So this leads directly into it. The first model I ever built, okay? It was of an obscure Namco character called Valkyrie.
Oh, that.
So I was just like, well, I have this model of Valkyrie in my room now. I guess I should probably know the first thing about the character.
That sounds so you, Ross.
So I bought the Famicom game to begin with. It's extremely cheap, literally, it's $3 American. It's super common. It came out in 1986, so I need this for context, which is the same year that Legend of Zelda and Dragon Quest came out.
It's also the
Japan.
same year where I was born.
Yes, I was born 1 year earlier. It's basically like if you tried to mash Dragon Quest and Legend of Zelda together, but made it even more cryptic. Let me put it this way. There is not a single line of text in this game besides the ending. Legend of Zelda would give you hints. They weren't necessarily good hints, but you'll go into a cave occasionally and some old guy would tell you, hey, maybe you should go to this area. Or give you, some kind of tiny clue. In this one, you're just dropped off in the overworld. It was like, go ahead. Do your thing.
What was the name of the game again?
Valkyrie.
Valkyrie no Boken on the Famicom. So it's also known as Adventure of Valkyrie. That also makes it a little easier to find. If you look at it, it's like the most primitive looking thing you could probably imagine it being. But the main problem with this game is, again, if you played any 8-bit RPGs, like Phantasy Star, which you have recently, then 8-bit RPGs can be extremely cryptic.
Yes, they can.
Here's one early example. So, within the first leg of the game, you kind of can figure out what to do. You have 2 pyramids to go through. Once you get the gear from those pyramids, you basically have nowhere that you can actually get to that of worth. What the game expects you to do is to take your hatchet and cut down some extremely specific mountains in a mountain range to get through it.
Okay, this sounds like the tornado puzzle from Castlevania 2?
Yes. Except remember, Castlevania 2 had hints. They weren't good hints, but they had something in the game.
So it was like one game is a one-sided puzzle thing 10 years before Myst made it cool.
Kinda, yeah. Only with random encounters. The random encounters that will kill you, and if you die, you get reset to your to the beginning of the level of experience that you are at. Which, once you get towards later levels, and keep in mind your maximum level is 20, so if you happen to be 15, that's a long grind to the next level, and you lose it all if you die.
Oh, it's Dark Souls before Dark Souls, except even less forgiving.
After I got to the hatcheting the mountains part, I was like, I was kind of enjoying this game for its weird simplicity, but you know what, I'm kind of done with it. So I moved on to the arcade game that was its follow-up.
Ooh, an arcade game, you say?
Legend of Valkyrie, or Valkyrie No
Legend of Valkyrie, you say?
Which is a 2-player cooperative run-and-gun platformer. Overhead run-and-gun platformer. Think something like Commando or Akari Warriors.
Only in the 1980s you could have a game established as one specific genre and its direct sequel being something completely different. It was a more experimental time.
This game is hard because it's an arcade game. It has very, very light RPG mechanics to it. I mean, basically you don't even level up or anything. You just kind of get consumable weapons as upgrades. But, the fact that it's like a 2-player cooperative game, and it's very easy to pick up and play, and, you earn money and buy items. Like, if you played something like Kadash or maybe the D&D beat-em-ups, it's kind of like that type of, like, very, very light RPG elements on it. They ported this to the PC Engine, or TurboGrafx 16. Basically, you know how I mentioned the platformer part of it, right?
Yes.
In the arcade version, the platforming really isn't an issue because the platforms are all, like, extremely big. If you miss a jump, even with the kind of floaty overhead controls, it's kind of your fault. You have huge targets to aim for. Since it's one of those vertically oriented screens that the arcades love to do, where you had, like, a ton of real estate to work with, you would also have a lot of jumping room.
Psst. Psst.
Yes?
It's real estate.
Well, on the PC Engine, they shrunk the platforms to near microscopic levels.
Oh, that's not nice.
And kept the same jumping mechanics.
Oh, that's not really nice.
That's not nice. I mean, if you fall, you lose basically a heart of health. But that's still really rough.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like a user-friendly game.
You can get used to it with some trial and error, and there was fun to be had there. But, oh boy, getting to that point. I managed to get through that, and I got to the last boss in that, and I got as far as I could in Adventure of Valkyrie, and now I'm just like, okay, well, I'm working on videos for them. As you can tell, I probably have a lot to say. But I just kind of had to share this kind of weird odyssey, because none of these games got released outside of Japan. With one curious exception. On Namco Museum Volume 5... Keep in mind, this was the last one, the rarest by far. They actually translated the arcade version of Legend of Valkyrie and put it on the disc. That is literally the only English translation and the only official English release of any Valkyrie game. And when you know that Namco Museum Volume 5 regularly goes for over $100 US. What's strange to me about this series is there haven't really been any Valkyrie games since Legend of Valkyrie. And Namco continues to push this character without actually making games with her in
I
it.
wish they would push Klonoa more instead.
Didn't Klonoa get into, like, Project
Spin-off.
X Zone or something?
Yes, but that was about it.
So did
Yeah.
Valkyrie. And Valkyrie is way more obscure.
How can we possibly have a future if we do not preserve our past?
That's
is
what my
the
basement
$1 million
is for.
question. Your basement is going to preserve all of the past. Really,
All of the
at the
video
rate
gaming
we are
past.
in, the rate that we are with how terrible the preservation of the medium's history is. Really at the mercy of the corporations. Emulation is still the only way to go.
That's what the HD remakes are for.
Well, okay, so the problem is when, say, you have a company like Telenet Japan, okay? Company no one would freaking remember. So, Sunsoft bought Telenet Japan before they went under. Then, Konami bought Sunsoft. So, do you think Konami even realizes they own any Telenet Japan games? No. It's just locked in the copyright coffers.
What games did Telenet Japan publish?
I just threw out there as like an obscure publisher. They did the Valis series, which is...
that's why you know about them.
Yes, but I was just showing an example off the top of my head. It's not like the games are particularly good or noteworthy, but you will never ever see any of them see the light of day again.
I'm going
You'll
to
never
say
get an
this.
official re-release of like anything they ever made.
I rarely say something positive about a company of any kind, especially Sega, but I really like what Sega is doing at the moment. The whole SEGA Ages trend that they are started, a very low-key trend, but one that I cannot help but respect. Basically, they are re-releasing, one by one, their older games. Games that would not be of any appeal to modern players. It's the company's older games, such as Phantasy Star, or Sonic 1, or what was the company's icon and mascot before Sonic?
Alex Kidd?
Alex Kidd, yes, that's the one. Those are but a few of the games that they have re-released. They are basically the original games as they were intended to be played, except with some of their basic mechanics and gameplay tweaked just enough, not by much, but just enough to make said games appealing to modern players.
And keep in mind that they're all optional tweaks. You can usually shut them off and play the game in its original format unaltered.
That's also great, but that's what made me play and beat Phantasy Star in the first place. I once tried to play Phantasy Star as it was originally intended when the Virtual Console existed, which is a problem in its own right. But that game was virtually unplayable. It demanded a ton of grinding on your part, and the dungeons did not have maps for them, and they all look the same, so getting lost is
was a
inevitable.
thing that will happen, yes.
The new SEGA Ages version has a map for the dungeons, and the gameplay is tweaked just enough that you don't have to grind excessively much in order to get the money and the experience, making the game a lot more palatable for your modern tastes, while still preserving the original feeling of the game, the original graphics and sounds. And I like that, I respect that move. It's not a remaster that ruins the graphics or the aesthetic. It's not a remake that makes it objectively worse, like the remake of Secret of Mana, which is one of the worst games I've ever played in my entire life, might I add. It's the original games, except better. I like that.
Treatment to Phantasy Star 2. God damn, that game needs it. Because that game basically has one mode, kick you in the nuts until you like it.
I'm currently looking forward for the release of Puyo Puyo SEGA Ages.
That game really doesn't need a SEGA Ages version, honestly. The
SEGA Ages will give me infinite credits. So yes.
So in some cases
and there is online multiplayer added to it, apparently.
Yeah, for some cases the roughness of it all gives the games its own identity, even though it wouldn't be very, let's say, user-friendly sometimes.
But anyway, I like these SEGA Ages in concept. Unfortunately, you cannot get physical copies of those games. You can only buy them and download them from the Nintendo Network for your Nintendo Switch, which links us to that whole other problem that we have with the cloud and history preservation and region locks and digital locks in general, all things that are determined by the whims of a corporation. The same corporation can decide to shut down an entire market of online games, such as the Virtual Console, making sure that you will never be able to play the games you thought you owned ever again.
When you're part of a kind of a bigger structure, it's easy to get yourself detached from reality or stuff.
I have tons of games that I played and bought from the PlayStation Network. I cannot play any of them because I don't have a PlayStation 3. Now I hear that the next Sony console will have retro compatibility, which I'm going to assume means it will allow me to play the games I have bought already. Well, regardless, we had a topic, we veered a lot from it, and we had a few more things to say, but now it's time to wrap this podcast up, like a nice little present for you all to enjoy. I have been Madhog the Master. I just realized we forgot to do the introductions at the very beginning of this, but...
No one knows. No one who knows who or cares who I am.
Welcome to the self-deprecation club.
Yeah, no one cares about. I mean, Madhog's channel has like 1,000 subscribers, yet the views are usually in their 30s.
That's just how YouTube works.
I mean, I have about double that, and my views are still in like the 40s. So I mean, everything except the Monster Girl stuff. The Monster Girl will get like a.
Oh, and
yes, too bad you cannot monetize those videos.
I actually can.
Oh, and I thought people don't watch my videos because I'm not interesting enough.
No, it's because you're a very, 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 very small YouTube channel, and
YouTube
in a late-stage capitalist society that YouTube embodies in the way it presents content, the top of the line stay on top, and those at the bottom stay forever at the bottom.
My followers may not be many, but they are fiercely loyal.
That's good.
That's good. Just like when I had fiercely loyal followers for my fanfictions. Thanks for joining us, everybody. This has been, again, Madhog the Master, and this has been Ross Faries.
I'm stupid, yes.
I am the only one who can say that about you. Don't do that to yourself. And then we have Matti Mali, aka Hedonistic Actor, the Finnish one.
I'm not stupid.
Self-affirmation. Ross could learn a thing or two about that.
I exist.
And this is the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed all of this rambling and occasionally some point that we would make during the entire enterprise and exchange. Good night, everybody.
I hope you at least enjoyed hearing us talk.
Night.
Ta-ra-ta-ra-ra-ta-ra, wahoo! Ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta.